Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It started with a message I shouldn't have answered. Adam was my husband, Daniel's oldest friend, the kind of man you met once and never forgot. He had an easy way about him, a quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. We'd always gotten along, trading harmless banter whenever he visited, but it had never gone beyond that. Until last month, it was a Thursday night when Daniel told me Adam would be stopping by. Just for a drink, nothing big, he'd said while rushing out the door for work. But Adam arrived much earlier than I expected, carrying a bottle of wine. And a small smile that made something low in my stomach tighten. We sat in the living room, the rain tapping against the windows, the glow from the fireplace painting everything in warm tones. The conversation flowed easily, about books, travel, and moments we both kept to ourselves over the years. There was a subtle shift somewhere between the first glass of wine and the second. I noticed how his eyes lingered when I laughed, how he leaned just slightly closer than necessary when he refilled my glass. "You've changed," he said quietly, almost like a confession. "You're softer somehow, but stronger too." It was the kind of thing no one had said to me in years. Not Daniel. Not anyone. I told myself to keep my distance, but my body didn't seem to listen. My knee brushed against his. I didn't pull it back. His gaze dropped to where our legs touched, and when his eyes returned to mine, the air between us was suddenly thick and unsteady. We didn't kiss right away. Adam wasn't the type to rush. He simply reached over, fingers brushing my wrist before curling around it, slow and deliberate, as if giving me time to pull away. I didn't. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his voice low, the kind that stirred something deep inside me. I didn't say a word. Somehow we ended up on the couch, the wine forgotten. The rain outside grew heavier, matching the pulse I felt hammering in my chest. He sat close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, his hand resting lightly on my thigh, testing the boundaries he already knew I was ready to cross. When he finally leaned in, his lips brushed the side of my jaw before finding mine. It wasn't hurried. It was patient, careful, but underneath was a current of hunger that neither of us could ignore. I don't know how long we stayed like that, our breaths uneven, my fingers tangled in his shirt. Every touch from him was deliberate, as though he wanted to memorize me. I didn't realize until later that I was doing the same. "Adam," I whispered, my voice shaking for reasons I didn't want to name. He pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, his thumb tracing a slow line along my cheek. "You feel this too, don't you?" I swallowed hard and nodded. My whole body felt electric, each moment stretching out like it could shatter at any second. What happened next wasn't frantic or careless. It was slow, deep, and dangerously intimate. The kind of closeness that makes you forget the world outside exists. Every move he made was purposeful, his hands grounding me even as tremors ran through me. I knew the storm outside would eventually pass, and that Daniel would come home. And life would demand explanations I didn't have the courage to face. But for that night on that couch, all I felt was Adam, steady, consuming, and entirely too much to ever undo. The rain had been steady all night, but by the time Adam and I pulled apart, it had shifted into a gentle drizzle, the kind that made the air smell fresh and new. It should have felt like a moment to breathe, but instead it was almost unbearable. He sat back on the couch, still close enough that our knees touched, his breathing slow but uneven. My lips still tingled from the way he'd kissed me, unhurried yet devastating, as though he'd been holding back for years. I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes right away. I was too afraid of what I'd see there. "Say something," I finally murmured, my voice barely above the sound of the rain. Adam ran a hand through his hair, looking away before leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "If I say what I want to say, I won't be able to stop myself." It should have been a warning. Instead, it was a dare. I leaned in, my voice softer but steadier than I expected. "Then don't stop." He froze, studying me like he was trying to commit every detail to memory. Then his hand was on my face again, warm and steady, guiding me back into another kiss. This one was different, not tentative, not restrained. His other hand slid to the small of my back, pulling me closer until I was almost in his lap. My pulse was wild, my thoughts scattered, my body alive in ways I hadn't been in years. The couch seemed too small for the space we needed, and yet it felt like the only place in the world that mattered. His touch was sure but careful, as though every brush of his fingers was a silent question and my every breath was the answer. My hands found the back of his neck, holding him close, unwilling to let go. "Do you have any idea?" he whispered against my skin. "How long I've wanted this?" I didn't answer, partly because I didn't know, partly because my voice might betray just how much I wanted it to. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, tangled together, the world outside shrinking to nothing. The heat between. Use wasn't just physical, it was years of unspoken words, of glances held a second too long, of something unacknowledged finally breaking free. Every time I thought we might stop, that we'd pull away before crossing the line completely, one of us would lean back in, unable to sever the connection. By the time we finally slowed, my hair was mussed, my lips swollen, my heart still racing. Adam kept one hand on my thigh as though afraid I might slip away if he let go. His eyes searched mine, but not for regret, for reassurance. For some sign that this wasn't just a momentary lapse. "We can't," I began, the words catching in my throat. "I know," he said quickly, though his thumb was still brushing my skin. "But I don't want tonight to disappear like it didn't happen." Something in me ached at that. I should have told him it was a mistake. I should have reminded him and myself of who I belonged to. Instead, I reached for him again, just to feel the weight of his presence one last time before the night ended. When the knock on the door finally came, sharp and sudden, we both froze. My heart lodged in my throat. But it wasn't Daniel. It was just the delivery man bringing the dinner I'd forgotten to order hours ago. Adam laughed under his breath, the tension easing just enough for us to breathe again. He didn't leave right away. We ate in the kitchen, barely touching the food, our knees brushing beneath the table. Every accidental grace felt deliberate, every glance a reminder of what had just happened, and what could again. When he finally stood to go, I followed him to the door. The storm had almost stopped entirely, the street lamps casting soft halos in the damp night air. He looked at me like he wanted to say something more, but instead, he just reached up, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "Be careful with me," he murmured. And then he was gone, walking down the wet sidewalk until I couldn't see him anymore. I stood there far too long after the door closed, still feeling the ghost of his touch, the echo of his voice. The couch behind me was a silent witness, carrying the weight of something I wasn't ready to name but couldn't deny. That night, I climbed into bed beside Daniel, who never stirred as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My body still remembered. Adam's hands, his mouth, his voice. And somewhere deep inside, I already knew this wasn't the last time it would happen. 3 days passed, though it felt like weeks. I told myself I wouldn't see Adam again. That, the moment on the couch, had been a perfect storm, rain, loneliness, too much wine, never to be repeated. But that was a lie I could barely get myself to believe. On the 4th day, he texted me. "Adam, you left your scarf in my car last month. I can drop it off if you want." I stared at the screen far too long. The scarf wasn't the point. We both knew it. Me. "Sure, I'll be home around 6. The hours between then and 6 were a haze. I tried to cook, then abandoned it. Tried to clean, then gave up. My mind kept drifting back to the couch, the way his hands had mapped my skin, the way my pulse had raced like it hadn't in years. When he arrived, the sky was bruised with twilight, the air still heavy from the rain earlier that morning. He stood in the doorway, holding the scarf, looking almost hesitant. "You okay?" I asked, leaning against the frame. He nodded, then looked away. "I almost didn't come. I thought it might be better if I didn't. I swallowed, my heart thudding so hard it was almost painful. But you're here. I'm here. We stood like that for a moment too long, the air between us tightening until I had to step aside to let him in. The living room felt smaller than usual, the couch almost daring us to repeat what we'd done. He set the scarf on the coffee table. I should go, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I took a step toward him. Adam, he closed the distance in 2 strides. His mouth found mine before I could speak again, his kiss urgent, almost desperate. My hands gripped the front of his shirt, pulling him closer until his chest pressed to mine. The world tilted, the sound of my own breathing, the heat of his body. The familiar scent of him. We ended up on the couch again, but this time there was no hesitation. His hands explored with a hunger that made my skin burn, yet there was still a care to it, a reverence, as though he knew this was fragile and could shatter if either of us pushed too far too fast. When he pulled back to look at me, his eyes were dark, searching. Tell me to stop. I can't, I whispered. Don't make me. That was all it took. His lips were on my neck, my collarbone, his touch bold but tender, his breath warm against my skin. My fingers tangled in his hair, holding him there as if letting go would undo everything. Every inch of me was alive, aware of him in a way that made me dizzy. God, I've wanted you like this for so long, he said between breaths, his voice low, almost ragged. The storm that had been building between us broke completely. There was no room for guilt, no space for the outside world. Only his weight against me, the way he moved with a mix of urgency and restraint, the way we seemed to fit as though we'd been made for this. After we stayed tangled together, my head resting on his shoulder, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with everything we weren't ready to say out loud. When he finally broke it, his voice was soft. You know, this changes everything. I closed my eyes. It already has. He stayed until the streetlights came on, until it was late enough that the risk of someone seeing his car outside my house gnawed at me. But even as he left, his hand lingered on mine, as if neither of us could fully let go. That night, I lay in bed beside Daniel again, staring at the same ceiling, but this time my body still hummed from Adam's touch. I knew the line had been crossed twice now, and crossing it again would be dangerously easy. And deep down, I also knew something I hadn't let myself admit until then. I didn't want to stop. The next week felt like walking a tightrope. I went through the motions, work, dinners with Daniel, casual texts to friends, but in the back of my mind, Adam was everywhere. I could still feel the ghost of his touch when I was washing dishes. The memory of his breath on my neck would hit me in the middle of meetings. Nights were the worst. I'd lie next to my husband, listening to his steady breathing, and think about another man's hands, another man's voice, another man's lips. Adam didn't text for 4 days. The silence was excruciating. I told myself it was for the best. Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe I would too. But the truth was, I checked my phone every hour, waiting. The message came late on a Friday night. Adam, are you awake? I stared at it for a few seconds, pulse quickening, then typed back before I could think. Me. Yes. The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Adam, can I see you? I should have said no. It was late. Daniel was upstairs in the shower, and I had no excuse, no way to explain it if I got caught, but my fingers betrayed me. Me. Where? Adam, your place tonight? The house felt unnaturally quiet after I sent Daniel to bed with a lazy excuse about needing to finish some work downstairs. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged myself on the couch, the same couch where everything had started, my mind playing out every possible way this could end. Good and bad. When Adam arrived, he didn't knock. He texted, "I'm here," and I opened the door to find him standing there in the dark, rain dripping from his jacket, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," I said, Though my voice lacked conviction, I know. Then he stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate slowness. His eyes never leaving mine. We didn't speak again for a while. The air between us was electric, every inch of space charged. Then, without warning, he was close. So close I could feel the heat of his body. His hand slid to the back of my neck, and his lips brushed mine in a kiss that started slow but deepened quickly. Fueled by everything we hadn't said over the last week, this wasn't like last time. Last time there had been hesitation, the sharp awareness of crossing a line. Tonight there was nothing but hunger. My hands roamed under his jacket, over the damp fabric of his shirt. His fingers traced the curve of my jaw, then my collarbone, then lower, as if memorizing every part of me. "You've been in my head every damn day," he murmured against my mouth. "I can't stop thinking about you." His words hit something deep in me, something that had been starving for this kind of attention for years. Daniel loved me in his way, but it was predictable, safe. Adam was wildfire. We ended up tangled. On the couch, my legs hooked around his waist, his hands gripping my hips as if he couldn't bear the thought of letting me go. His breath was hot against my ear, his voice low and rough. "I don't care if this ruins me," he said. "I just want you." Some part of me knew this was dangerous, knew that the deeper we went, the harder it would be to stop, but I didn't care either. The world outside could burn, and I'd still want this. When we finally slowed, the room was dim except for the glow from the street lamp outside, casting shadows over his face. I rested my forehead against his, our breaths mingling, my heart still racing. "Adam," I whispered. "Yeah? I'm scared of how much I want you." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm scared too, but it's too late now, isn't it?" It was. He stayed until almost 3 a.m., and when he finally left, the house felt too big, too quiet. I sat alone in the living room for a long time, clutching the scarf he'd returned days earlier, the scent of him still clinging to it. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew one thing for certain: the next time he asked to see me, I wouldn't hesitate. The days after Adam's late-night visit felt heavier, as if some invisible weight had settled on my chest. My body went through the motions, answering emails, cooking dinner, folding laundry, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I replayed that night again and again, dissecting every glance, every breath, every whispered word. The way his fingers had traced slow, possessive lines over my skin. The way his voice had deepened when he'd said my name. The way I clung to him like drowned without his touch. And then there was the fear, sharp and sudden, that I was teetering on the edge of something irreversible. 3 days later, he texted Adam, "I'm at the coffee shop on Brook, if you're free." It wasn't planned, which made it even more dangerous. Daniel was at work, my schedule clear for the next couple of hours. I told myself I could go, see him, have a coffee, and leave. Nothing had to happen. When I walked in, Adam was at a corner table, leaning back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the backrest. He was wearing a charcoal sweater that clung to his frame just enough to hint at the shape beneath. His eyes lit when he saw me, not the polite brightness you give a friend, but the kind that pulled you across the room without a second thought. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't been sure I would. "You knew I would," I replied. Sitting across from him, the conversation was normal enough at first: work, the weather, the way the city seemed to sink deeper into winter every day. But there was an undercurrent, a tension humming between us, that made the air feel warmer than it should. Halfway through my coffee, his hand brushed mine across the table. It was the smallest touch, but it was enough to set my pulse racing. I didn't move my hand away when we left. The wind outside was sharp, cutting through my coat. Adam walked me to my car, and I thought we'd part there safely, with a smile and maybe a lingering look. Instead, he caught my wrist just as I was about to open the door. "Wait." I turned, and then he was there, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in his eyes. His lips found mine in a kiss that was quick at first, almost testing, but deepened instantly when I didn't pull away. The cold air vanished. My back pressed against the car door, his body leaning into mine, his hand threading into my hair. When he finally stepped back, his breath was visible in the frigid air. "Come by later, I'll text you when." I didn't answer, but we both knew I would. That night, I lied to Daniel about meeting a friend for drinks. My hands shook slightly as I drove to Adam's apartment. He opened the door before I even knocked, pulling me inside as if he'd been waiting right there. The heat of his place was a stark contrast to the cold outside, and so was the way he looked at me, like I was the only thing in the world he wanted. The kiss we shared then wasn't rushed. It was slow, deliberate, his hands framing my face, his thumbs brushing my cheeks as if I was something fragile. "You've been in my head every second since last time," he murmured, and just like before, the world outside disappeared. Every touch was careful but charged, every kiss deepening until it felt like we'd forgotten how to breathe without each other. The couch was behind us, and in a heartbeat, we were tangled there, just like the first time, only now there was no hesitation. We stayed like that for hours, talking in whispers, sharing touches that lingered far too long for anything platonic. He told me things about his past, about moments in his life he'd never shared with anyone else. And in turn, I told him about the cracks in my marriage, the moments when Daniel had felt far away, even when he was standing right beside me, by. The time I left, it was past midnight. The streets were empty, the kind of silence that made every sound, the hum of my engine, the crunch of gravel under my tires, feel amplified. I knew I should feel guilty. I should feel shame. Instead, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The next weeks blurred into a series of stolen moments, quick meetings in quiet cafes, late-night visits to his apartment, long drives with no destination except the space we could claim for ourselves. We learned each other's patterns, each other's tells. I knew the way his left hand curled when he was trying not to reach for me. He knew the exact moment my voice softened before I gave in. One night, it almost fell apart. Daniel came home early, just minutes after Adam had left my place. I'd barely had time to smooth my hair and hide the extra glass from the counter. My heart pounded so hard I thought Daniel would hear it. "You okay?" he asked, glancing at me with mild suspicion. "Yeah," I lied, my voice steady even though my pulse was still racing. "Just tired." That near miss only made it worse. The risk didn't scare me anymore, it thrilled me. Every time Adam touched me, it felt like we were defying the world, and still somewhere deep down, I knew this couldn't last. But knowing that only made every kiss, every lingering glance, every whispered word even more intoxicating.